Hello, welcome to the West Tigers podcast. This is episode number 108. Eddie Otto joined by Garry Watson on a Tuesday night. Garry, how's your week been?
Yeah, not too bad. It's improved since the weekend. The weekend was pretty poor.
Yeah, I was usually asked for one word, Garry, to describe that performance. I wasn't sure whether to go with pathetic or predictable. Which one are you going to go for, or something else?
Mate, it was heartbreaking. Yeah, I was really disappointed in that effort on the weekend. Tommy Rodonigas' celebration of game and the players just didn't aim up.
I mean, yeah, it's got to the point for me where it's almost a lot of Tigers fans. I don't know if they are heartbroken anymore. It's just deflating, Garry. I mean, it wasn't a surprise, was it? It was sort of 15 minutes, and I think it went from 0-all to 18-0, and we didn't touch the ball in between that.
Yeah, 3 sets of 6, and the game was practically over. And it's really a trait that this side has been showing for the past decade, that they're mentally weak in certain periods of the game, and a game is gone in the blink of an eye.
Has to be an attitude thing in some respects, Garry, because, I mean, like you said, they started the second half pretty well, and the comeback, they did make some sort of a comeback. I know it finished 36-28. Do you see some sort of positive in that, or do you just think, the fact that it was over after 15 minutes, that it's really just papering over the cracks?
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of positives in the game at all. And the comeback really isn't a positive to me, because we've put ourselves in a position that we had to make a huge comeback to get out of. The only thing that I will point out is that first kind of set of 6 after the halftime break, as you mentioned, that kind of showed me what we can be capable of when we have players that actually run with a bit of intent, run with a bit of conviction. That's how we should be playing all the time. I thought Thomas McHaley, especially during that period just after halftime, was quite good and running the ball quite hard. And that, to me, is where we're falling down, is a lack of vigour and a lack of intent in the way we play, both in defence and with the ball.
Yeah, McHaley just 28 minutes, and I think he ran for 120 metres. Of the starting players, again, I thought Adam Dewey was probably a shining light. He had 1 line break, 2 line break assists, and a try and 2 try assists. Obviously, some big team news that we'll get to later in the podcast. But again, I thought he was one of the guys in the field. Every time he got the ball, Garry, I thought that something good might happen.
Yeah, I was very impressed with his game again on the weekend. He was in the top 2 players for us. I thought he and Dane Laurie both had a really good game. Dewey's very strong when going to the line. I would like to see him develop a little bit more of a pass to get his outside men into a bit of space. But I can't really complain with how he's progressing as a 5'8". I'm quite happy with how he's progressing as a 5'8", which means when we speak about the team list in a moment, there's a fair bit to say about that. What I also found quite impressive with Dane Laurie's game is we're actually getting him ball in good position, whereas in the past, a lot of the time, we've been getting him ball when he's been flat-footed and he's trying to make something out of nothing. At least now we're getting him some ball in a position to do something with that ball. So that was a positive as well, but there wasn't a lot to be happy about.
Well, I mean, Dane Laurie and Luke Garner, there was probably 12 points gone begging there, but they did create a number of chances again. But the main forum topic after the game, Garry, it was pretty glum. How bad is this team was a topic, and it had over 170 replies. And I've got to say now, after 9 rounds, I'm of the opinion that this is definitely a bottom 4 side. I think we've perhaps had slightly weaker rosters in 3 or 4 years previous, but we've had more maybe team-oriented players, even guys like maybe Chris Lawrence and Corey Thompson, and who weren't necessarily standouts. But at the moment, this looks like a team that's a bunch of individuals. And for me, the only team I can semi-confidently say will finish above is Canterbury.
Yeah, to me, Canterbury stops us from winning the wooden spoon. But they play with a bit more conviction than what our team seems to be. They just really struggle to score points, and I can't see them kind of finishing above us. They will probably lose to them, because that's the type of game we will lose. Your point about the team playing as individuals, I don't think this roster has gelled well together as a team. That's quite evident. I think on paper, this is a much better roster than I thought we had last year and over the last couple of years. So something hasn't gelled right there. And I don't see the team playing real well together as a team. And I think that kind of shows out in our poor defensive structures and our poor attacking structures.
It's interesting. Maybe because me and Joel particularly me, used to harp on a lot about the lack of speed in the team in previous years and maybe the lack of leadership and to get more flair in the side. And we have gone that way with, the Leilua brothers and James Roberts. But do you think maybe myself and others were maybe just undervaluing having that identity we had a little bit under Cleary in the first year of Madge, where we had a bit of grit about us and we were stronger defensively, and some of those veterans, Farah, Marshall, Chris Lawrence, Corey Thompson, Elijah Taylor, that maybe did some of those one percenters. Are we sort of seeing a transition there from this roster that, like you said, it just hasn't gelled?
Yeah, I think when you have a look at the roster, the players we have lost are all fairly committed and full-hearted type of players. Chris Lawrence made a career, especially the second half of his career, out of doing the runs that no one else wanted to do. Elijah Taylor was always leading the line speed. So Corey Thompson, I don't think I've ever seen that guy give up on a play in his life. So losing those sort of players from the side is probably, it's almost like they're the glue to the team. And with that glue gone, the team's kind of fallen apart. And the guys we've brought in don't really have those same attributes.
Sort of reminds me a little bit of, I don't know if you remember this far back, but the start of 2013 when we lost Bo Ryan and Chris Hyington at the end of 2012. And we just started that year under Mick Potter, and it was almost like the arse had fallen out of the team, for want of a better word. They just lost a couple of those spiritual sort of leaders.
Yeah, it's becoming more evident as the year goes on that there's something not quite right in amongst the squad. And I hadn't really thought about it till you've raised it tonight, but I think that very well could be the case.
Before we get on to sort of digging into the coach again, because it's a big subject, just more on individuals, a tough night for a couple of rookies. Zach Sini, particularly 5 errors. They particularly went after him once he made 1 or 2. Anthony Don, experienced winger. It was an unhappy night for Zach, and he's paid for that with his spot.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that he was dropped after that game. He had a great debut. He's been great in reserve grade. The occasion, and once he made an error, kind of got too much for him the other night. And I think he probably needs to go back and regain that confidence in reserve grade. I do feel sorry for him because it's really hard. He had one good game, one bad game, and now he's out of the side. He doesn't really get a chance to rectify that. But I think that probably was the right choice. He had a horrible night the other night, and I don't want to give him too big of a hard time because he's in the second game of his career.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about the team later, but I mean, Jake Simpkin again, he's only on an extended bench, so he's been dropped this week. He's only 4 games into career. I think he had an outstanding debut and he was lining it up in State Cup, but there's no doubt, Gary, his last 2 games that he's struggled. I probably would have dropped him back to the bench, but he's definitely not ready for sort of 80 minutes of first grade with a poor side around him. Yeah,
I would have liked to have seen him keep his spot in the side with Little on the bench to kind of give him that break. I guess the coach saw it differently and has sent him back to reserve grade. What I will say about him going back to reserve grade is there's a lot of comparisons made between Harry Grant and Jake Simpkin. Now, you've got to have a look at their age. There's quite a difference in their age. Yes, last year was Harry Grant's first full season in first grade, but he's spent many seasons playing in the Queensland Cup, kind of building up his style of play and his game in a lot less pressure environment. So I don't think spending a little bit more time in reserve grade is going to hurt Jake Simpkin. I'm still quite confident we've got a really good hooker there. And I think a bit of extra time in reserve grade will probably do him a bit of good.
Okay, the main talking point for me, though, with the individual displays is you expect poor games from rookies in a bad side, but some of the senior players, Gary, and this has been a problem for a few years, some of our highest paid players continue to under-deliver. And I'll have to move on to our new captain, James Tarmo. I've been sort of guarded in trying to not to bag him in the first 8 weeks, but look, his stats have been cut in half. He's averaging about 75, 80 metres a game. I know he's probably playing less minutes, but Garry, he just looks slow out there. He looks cumbersome in attack, and he hasn't been watertight in defence either.
No, I haven't been that impressed with Tarmo. I think his first couple of games, he was solid without being outstanding. As his season's gone on, I think his game's deteriorated. I think he's really struggling in defence. I've seen quite a number of occasions where he's arm grabbed in tackles instead of hitting in with his shoulder. I think he may be struggling a little bit going from the class of the Penrith pack that he was playing in last year where the players around him made his job a little bit easier, to playing with the Tigers pack that isn't quite on the same level. I will say I still do like him as a leader. I like the way he spoke about Adam Dewey last week, coming out and saying the way he was building him up as a future leader. I really like leaders, not just in football, but in life in general, who build up younger people into leadership roles. And I by the looks of it, that looks like it's a bit of a passion for him. So I like that aspect of it. I love the way he speaks about young players, the same way he did at Penrith last year. But he does need to work on his game. His game's not up to standard at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, in the club's defence and his defence, he was brought in not expecting to be an absolute shining light. And the deal, I think, was structured the right way. 2 years. It's not a Russell Packer type deal where you're left with maybe dead weight for three or four seasons. Luke Brooks, again, Garry, I know he tried and I thought he tackled really well, but he just looks like a player at the moment that's completely devoid of confidence. I've said it a number of times. I think he's weighed down by losing at this club, and I almost get to the fact now where I sort of feel sorry for him. I think he has to be put out of his misery, because I just think the weight of this, carrying this for years as the halfback of this team, is sort of completely weighed him down, and the balloon's popped, and I think it's time to put him back to reserve grade.
Yeah, I can't see him recovering at our club. I think it's probably time for him to go back to reserve grade and probably look at finding another club. I think he could go to another club and do quite well, but I think the pressure of the position and the pressure of the expectation that has been placed on him at the club for so many years now that he has struggled to live up to, I think it's gotten too much. And I think it's at the point where that is just too heavy of a burden now. He seems to be carrying the entire club on his shoulders.
I mean,
and yeah,
I saw today, I don't know if you saw it, I saw Kyle Flanagan. I know Kyle Flanagan's younger, but he was a Bulldogs halfback, and he's been under pressure 7 or 8 weeks, and he got to the point where he sort of just broke down in the press conference and couldn't answer some of the questions. And then the Bulldogs 3 or 4 hours later dropped him. So I think maybe we forget about that sometimes as fans. We're all passionate, but the amount of pressure and scrutiny these days around rugby league is a lot bigger than it was 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I saw the Kyle Flanagan thing today, and it was really hard to watch. It actually reminded me that a couple of weeks ago, after the game at Leichhardt Oval, Luke Brooks was out on the field being interviewed and being abused relentlessly by some West Tigers supporters from the crowd. And it was something he really struggled to deal with that night. He visibly was upset that night. And to me, that's a sign that it's getting too big for him.
Mm.
And who knows, maybe we send him back to reserve grade and he finds that person again that came through 8 years ago. And maybe it's the best thing that happens to him. But at the moment, he's not the best thing for the team.
Okay. Yeah, interesting again. We'll get to that team selection because there's a number of players I want to talk about there. During the week, again, more talk about Madge. Paul Kent came out on Triple N. He was with Gordon Tallis, and he said Madge is the only thing not wrong with the Tigers, and they need to stick with Madge, and they have a soft underbelly, and the job is to get rid of half the players. I don't know if you listened or heard to that, Garry, but I'm sort of on the fence with this one. I know it's a hot talking point, the head coach, but there's still some things I think that Madge can control that at the moment he's not getting the best out of.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about when we look at the team list today, and a lot of that falls to him. Some of the stuff Kent said, I do have to agree with. We are soft. We have been soft for a number of years. We are one of the most mentally weak sides that I've seen. The symptom of that on the weekend we saw was the 3 tries in a row. As soon as something goes wrong with this team, they drop their bundle. It happened in the game we played at Bank West against Manly. Musgrove missed a couple of tackles and the game was over. It happened again on the weekend. A couple of little mistakes and the game is out of control. We fight well to try and get back into the game, but by that time it's too late. Once we're under a little bit of sustained pressure, we go to the water. The old chocolate soldiers comments that used to be said about Penrith come to mind. As soon as the pressure is applied, we melt. And that's the most disappointing thing at the moment.
I think it's particularly applicable to this season. I don't know. I think in 2018 and 2019, I didn't see a mentally weak side. I know there were still games, though, to be fair, that we were favourites in and needed to, in hindsight, if we had won, then we would have made the finals. but certainly this season. But just sort of to play, devil's advocate a bit, because there's a lot of frustration on the forum around the coach, and he controls some of the recruitment. He walked into, I think, a pretty horrible situation, but a lot of the squad now is his. Does he have to take some responsibility for some of those 50-50 signings that now has seen the team become a looser sort of side, or do you think it's just a whole club issue that for a decade we haven't been able to attract quality players?
What I will say, I am still quite happy with the recruitment at the club. Yep. I know we spoke about some players a little bit ago that we let go that kind of were missing. I think a lot of those 50-50 type players that we have, that we were spoken about before, those kind of gambles we made that we needed to come off to have a really good year, most of those were short-term gambles for not a lot of money to try and get us through this period that we have of this year and part of next year, where those young signings, those young guys that we've actually signed, for them to be ready to make the step up. A lot of the Tuki Simpkins as well, Stefano getting a little bit more time, and those younger players to come through so they can be the leaders of the team. So getting guys like Roberts and Leilua in to try and fill that gap to make us competitive this year was a gamble, but I don't think they're gambles that are going to cost us into the future, unlike gambles we've made in the past, where we were signing Russell Packer for long-term contracts on big money, signing Josh Reynolds for long-term contracts on big money. At least the gambles we've made now have a definite timeline and a way out for us.
No doubt, he's really hamstrung the first couple of years at the club, and I sort of, that's the disappointing thing for me, Garry. Is I saw this year as sort of his first year where it's almost like it's the majority of his roster. I don't know. Look, I'll be honest. I don't know a whole lot about the coaching box, but when it pans up there, I don't know a lot of the guys. I know Simon Dwyer's up there and Gavin Badger's up there, but the number of times this year they've panned to the box, and it just looks like it doesn't seem to. Are we lacking quality assistant coaches? Are we lacking someone maybe like, a John Morris or someone who's been in the game recently who can help a side with defensive structure and things like that? I suppose I'm saying is Madge maybe surrounding himself with guys that are not helping him.
Yeah, for a number of weeks now, my preferred option in regards to coaching has been not to get rid of Madge, is to surround him with better people. Surround him with people like John Morris. I would have been on the phone to John Morris the day after he was sacked to try and get him across here. Because not only does that kind of, that gives a little bit of extra support around him, it also gives us a plan B. I'm really worried about what happens if we do sack Madge. Where do we go? Who do we get to the club? Who's going to want to come to a club who the last 3 or 4 coaches have kind of either left or been pushed out in some kind of way?
Well, look at that.
And that's my fear moving forward.
I mean, every coach who's been sacked, I think, by West Tigers, Garry, has failed to get another NRL gig.
Yeah, not one coach we have, not one coach has ever coached again in the NRL after they finished with us. And that includes Tim Sheens. Tim Sheens had many roles after he finished at the Tigers, but he didn't coach again in the NRL. So that's the whole 20-year history. We haven't had a coach go from us to another NRL role. That's something that probably weighs on the mind of coaches when they look at coming here. And it's probably something we're going to have to deal with if we do get rid of Maguire. And I'm really worried about the type of coach we kind of attract in that situation.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, over the past few years, Brett Hodgson was there. Even he would have been an inexperienced. He's gone. I can't remember off the top of my head the guy who's in charge of the Magpies who was 6-1, but I think he's got a PE school teaching background. So it's not like he's a big sort of name. So is there anyone that you'd be particularly sort of targeting if things were to go from bad to worse with Madge? Would it be a sort of a Wayne Bennett type of senior coach, or would it be like a younger, like a Cameron Serrato or Craig Fitzgibbon? Oh, I'm saying all this, Garry, but the fact is, I suppose your point is like a Cameron Serrato, if he's offered the job, may not want it.
I worry about giving a young coach the role here. I think the reason Tim Sheens did so well at the club is he was very well respected. He had a lot of experience in the game, and he's really been the only one who's been able to get control of our club and kind of lead the club in a manner where all the backroom stuff that goes on at our club was kind of non-existent because Tim just rode roughshod over the top of it. Now, if we get in a young coach, how do they deal with the kind of machinations that happens behind closed doors at our club that seems to be an issue because we have the same problems occurring time and time again? So I really think if we are looking at a coach, we need someone who's experienced. I worry about giving even someone like John Morris the reins here because it is probably the toughest job in the NRL to coach at the West Tigers, and putting a young guy into that situation, I don't know how well they'll fare. One thing I will say about John Morris is he probably has a pretty good understanding of what the club's like, having played here. So he's probably in a better position than a lot of the other younger coaches. But yeah, I'm lost what we do if we get rid of Maguire. Now, in saying that, I'm not happy with Maguire. So it's a really difficult situation for us to be in.
Yeah, I concur there. I think it's difficult because I think, if we were to turn around in a couple of weeks after a couple more losses and sack Madge, I wouldn't be convinced at all that there'd be a quick fix around the corner with the state of the roster and the mental sort of weakness of this playing group and the whole malaise of the club. I don't think that's necessarily the solution, Garry. But when I look, a little bit deeper, I mean, his record at the Tigers is pretty ordinary, but every coach over the last 10 years had an ordinary record, 18 wins from 50. But his last 50 games at South, you know how many he won of those?
Probably about the same.
18 games. So, I mean, that's a 100-game stretch there. And that South side in 2015 and 16, I know they'd been to the mountain and got the, Everest and won the trophy. And he's a proven winner. But that's a fair sample size now that makes me just worry a little bit about Madge as a long-term proposition.
Yeah, as I've said numerous times on our podcast, the big concern I do have with Maguire is his inability to adapt. I don't think he can adapt to different style of players that don't suit his particular game plan. And I don't think he's adapted well to the rule changes that we've seen in the NRL over the last couple of years. That's been my big concern for the past 2 years. And nothing has happened during that time to kind of take those fears away. I don't see any change to the game plan that he was running 4 or 5 years ago at South Sydney. Now, that stopped working at South Sydney, and it definitely hasn't worked here. Something needs to happen there. That's why I'd like to see some really strong assistants come in around him, someone who can game plan for the modern game, who can communicate a little bit better with the modern day player to kind of help him, because there are things that he does really, really well. He trains the team very, very well, but I think he really struggles in game planning in the modern day and communicating with modern players.
I mean, there'd be no guy in that organisation at the moment working harder than Madge. I think Tigers fans can relate to that and can respect that 100%. But there were examples. I can't remember many in rugby league, but in the AFL with Damien Hardwick, who's a premiership winning coach at Richmond, the Tigers, ironically, he was out the door about 5 years ago. And they did this whole review and they basically surrounded him, beefed up the whole football department, got quality assistants from all other clubs. And they went on to win 3 premierships out of the last 4 years. Same thing happened with Nathan Buckley at Collingwood. And maybe to a lesser extent, Garry, I'm thinking of someone like Brad Arthur. He had a rocky time, at Parramatta, who were a club who were a shambles 7 or 8 years ago. And it's only really about his 4th season where they became a consistent powerhouse. So I guess that's the hope.
Yeah, Brad Arthur felt like he was days away from being fired for about 3 years. So I guess these things do take time, and the problem is I don't see the improvement in our players. I can't really name any players who have improved their play while they've been playing under Maguire in the last few years, and that's a worry for me.
No, that's a fair point. I think it's watch his space over the next few weeks because he looks. I got to be honest. I watch his press conference, and I know he says all the same things, and he loves talking about the ebbs and flows of the game, Garry. But to me, he looks like deep down there's a lot that he'd like to say, or that he sort of believes that he's not. He doesn't. He can't quite say this team is. I don't know what to do.
The comment that's getting to me. This is not West Tigers.
No, it is.
Well, you know what? It's West Tigers, mate. If you keep showing this every single week.
The other thing I have is with coaches like him that are so used to being winners and being ruthless, is they themselves, it's a bit of a shock to them. You know, like there's examples in sort of European soccer of guys like Mourinho who'd go into clubs that were on the cusp of winning. So I think if Madge went into a club, you know, like a Penrith or like a who is or right on the brink, he's perfect. But he came in to our club. For me, he came in as the right coach at a really bad time. And I worry as he goes on and on, he gets more and more frustrated that players burn out, those kicking the chairs and stuff doesn't work, and then you end up with a mess. So let's wait and see. Let's talk about Benny Elias, Garry. He's back in the news. He wants to buy allegedly 50% of the West Tigers for $10 million. He says, you know, there's no money in football clubs and this is all about passion, Garry. I don't believe a word he says, Benny Elias. Is that too harsh?
No, I don't think it's too harsh at all. I think anyone who kind of remembers what happened with our main leagues club has every right to be wary about what Benny Elias has to say.
You think, though, I mean, I think it's very unlikely to happen, and I don't know his motives. I know he did either. I'm not sure if he was on the board when Tim Sheens was here or he had some sort of say. What do you think his motives are here?
Ultimately, I probably think in his mind he wants the best for the club. It's just whether he has the ability to kind of make that change. And I don't think he's the right person to be heavily involved in a club. I'm also a bit wary the fact that we don't know the other people involved. That kind of what's kind of being hidden there. Why are those people not happy to have their name put to this? So there's a few alarm bells going off with this to me. The board is actually, West Ashfield board, I think, are meeting tonight, probably as we speak, to kind of discuss this. So hopefully they're meeting to decide a polite way to say no.
Yeah, I mean, very, very little details, but I know he was in with a couple of prominent businessmen, I think Tony Sage from Perth. And, you know, it wouldn't put it past me that down the track, that would be something that may grow the, you know, pie and make this, you know, football club, 50% of it worth a lot more in the future if you were to move it to Perth. Is that a conspiracy theory, Garry?
Mate, there's a few floating around, but when Benny Elias is involved, those conspiracy theories kind of have a little bit more weight. There's also the one I heard a couple of days ago that it's actually East Brisbane who are interested as well. The East Brisbane Tigers are looking at getting into the NRL. So I heard that they may be interested in kind of getting involved with the West Tigers because then it kind of makes it easier for their path through. Just
on that, I was going to say, realistically, everyone who lives in Sydney wants to see the Tigers long-term here and have one home ground perhaps and be successful. But if someone was to come to you, if you were Justin Pascoe and said, you know, we're going to give you $20 million to start a new franchise in Brisbane or Perth, you can retain the colours, you can retain the name, potentially if you're in Perth, West Tigers or East Tigers or something, or we'd have to include West maybe somewhere in Brisbane. Is it something as a fan where you'd go, well, we've just been down the ringer so many times here, maybe if we ever want to become a powerhouse, this is something we could consider, or is that just being defeatist?
Look, to me, it would really have to depend on the situation. If it was a situation where the NRL looked at moving us to Perth, that's probably me done with rugby league at that level, at the NRL level. I'd still be involved in junior football and that sort of stuff. But at that level, that's probably me done with the NRL. If it was a situation where it was the West Tigers' only option to survive was to kind of make that sort of move, then I'd probably be a little bit more likely to follow that. But the way I support the club would change completely. I don't think I'd be a member. I don't think I'd be buying as much merchandise. All those sort of things kind of change because it's kind of like you didn't want me as a supporter because you moved away. So why should I support you in that kind of way? Though in saying that, I'd probably soften over time. It's very sports a thing that's in my heart, so it's a hard one.
So Garry, do you think overall, if it wasn't someone like Benny Elias, private ownership sort of has its advantages, or do you think the way West Ashfield, the structure there at the moment, is not holding us back or the problem?
Look, I'm not really happy with how the board is kind of operating, the West Tigers board at the moment. I don't like the fact that there's not a lot of say outside of West Ashfield who's on that board. Though the thing that concerns me about private ownership is you kind of become someone's plaything. And what happens if they decide they've had enough? Do they wind the club up? What is kind of their get out game. For example, say someone like Harry Tribanoff bought into the club and ran the club. Now he's getting on in years now, and I'd be worried about the succession after he's no longer around. What was kind of the plan with that? Because if no one in his family is kind of interested in it, what happens to the West Tigers then? So at least when you've got kind of a West Ashfield funding it and owning it, there's kind of a little bit more guaranteed about the future.
Okay, well, I guess watch this space. I'd be very, very surprised if Betting Alliance becomes a 50% shareholder, but who knows down the track. Now, this team is in, Garry, and it was a feisty reaction from Tigers fans. Some shock changes. Adam Dewey to the centres. Moses Mbai to 5'8". Luke Brooks stays at halfback. Jake Simpkin, Stefano Utokumanu, and Zaxini all dropped. I was going to ask you a multiple choice, Garry. Madge, with these changes, A, wants to be fired. B, has gone completely mad. Or C, there's going to be late changes and don't panic.
I think it's B. But I'm a little stunned by the changes we're seeing today.
Well, I mean, starting with Adam Dewey, I know you've talked about his best position potentially being centre, but you haven't said move him to the centres. He's been very influential. I know his defence has struggled at times, but he's not Robinson Crusoe there. I just find it a bizarre move that one of your most influential players, you're moving to, I think, the least important spot in the field, centre, and you're replacing him with a guy who's coming off a terrible game in Moses Mbai, who's proved a complete waste of money. I'm pretty shell-shocked by this.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on the same page with you, as you are. Even though I do see Dewey's best position at this point in time being a centre, I think he's developing quite nicely into a really good running 5'8". What was quite interesting is just before we actually started this podcast, I heard Mbai's actual comments about his move to 5'8", and basically saying he was going to allow Luke Brooks to be dominant and get Brooks' ball in position so he does well. And a lot of the wording he used was wording like, we have decided. So a lot of that seemed to be coming from Maguire. I think this is Maguire putting all the eggs into Luke Brooks' basket and trying to create a situation where he's the most dominant playmaker again, which kind of goes really against what Tamo said last week about how Adam Dewey needs to be running this team. So we have Tamo saying last week that this is Adam Dewey's team. He needs to be the main voice on the field. He needs to be controlling this team. Then a week later, we've moved him to centre. I really don't understand it at all. I do think his best position at this point in time is centre, but man, I don't get this move at all. And especially to put someone like Moses Mbai into 5'8", who is really struggling. And I've been a fan of his, but he was terrible on the weekend. His defence was out of position quite a bit. And I can't see that being any better playing at 5'8".
Well, I mean, that line about giving Luke Brooks run a show, I think that is flogging a dead horse. I mean, that is something that I've heard in the past, and I was sort of 50-50 at, maybe, Robbie Farah's overcalling Brooks or Benji Marshall. But, this year, Garry, surely you're clutching at straws with something like that. Jock Madden is on the bench, though. Is it something potentially where Madge is trying to maybe take the heat out of the selection and Jock Madden could start, or there could be some late change there in the spine?
Look, I was thinking that until I heard Empire's comments this afternoon, and his comments really, really tell me that Madge is seeing Luke Brooks as the main playmaker. Now, thinking about it a little bit more, maybe he's just giving Luke Brooks the last chance he possibly can to own that halfback role and own this team. And he's got Jock Madden there, that if it doesn't work, Jock Madden then goes into halfback. So maybe he's just allowing Luke Brooks to put his best foot forward before he kind of makes that decision. I hope that's what it is, but I find it a very puzzling decision. If you're going to change the halves, you should be dropping Luke Brooks and leaving Dewey at 5'8".
I mean, that's the other thing, is that sort of the rookies are the ones who have paid the price. And Madge talks a big game, in the post-match press conference about senior players stepping up. And then you look at this team and you see Jake Simpkin drop, Zaxini drop, Stefano Utokumanu dropped. Yet Moses Mbye promoted into the 5'8" position. Luke Brooks retains his position. It just flies in the face of that. I think if we get done heavily and that side runs out, I think he's putting himself in position for a pretty fierce backlash, at least from Tigers fans.
I think the backlash will be quite huge, but to be honest, the backlash is already quite big at the moment because the team has been poor for a number of games this season. The one I do have to mention, Stefano being dropped, I think is a terrible call. I think he's been very, very good, especially when he's played off the bench. We had him starting a couple of weeks ago, and now he's dropped back to the bench, and now he's been dropped, and I don't really think he's done anything wrong. What I will say is I don't mind sometimes a rookie getting a couple of weeks in the first grade and then being put back to reserve grade as part of their development. But when someone's playing like Stefano and the team, the way the team's been playing, I wouldn't be playing around with him. I'd just put him in there. He's going fine. I don't think he needs a break. I don't think he needs a rest. I don't think he needs to go down to reserve grade. I'm very disappointed Stefano has been dropped.
Yeah, I suppose Madge will have his say later at the week, and we don't see training and what goes on in team meetings and things like that. But I got to say, when I saw that team list, my faith in him went significantly down. I think it's the poorest team list I've seen, or the most baffling I've seen for some time. But we will wait and see how they run out and how they perform. Because if they get a win and they defend well, I suppose then on the flip side of that, he looks like somewhat of a genius. Is that too-
I saw the headline for one of the stories on Fox Sports today without reading the article, and it was West Tigers make shock changes. I'm thinking, Luke Brooks has been dropped. And then I read the article, and it was that Adam Doueihi was predicted to be moved to centre. And I still can't believe that's the decision that's been made. Yeah. Hopefully it is Ducks and Drakes to kind of get a bit of pressure off Madden, and he's going to come into the side. But I don't really see that kind of happening. It could be a situation where, I don't know. I'm a bit dumbfounded. Doueihi should be 5'8".
Well, I think if one player, I think he's got every right to be asking questions. And that's the problem. When you have a guy who's, I think, one of your next leaders who's actually been performing on the field, and then you demote him. I know he did similar with Benji last year, and Benji had a number of try assists, but maybe wasn't defending well. Do you think that's maybe something? Is that he looks at defensive areas and says, if you're not up to it there, then maybe that's a reason I'm going to demote you?
Well, one of the reasons I was worried when we first moved Doueihi to 5'8" was his defence in the front line. There's not a huge amount of difference between defending at 5'8" and defending at centre. If anything, you probably get a little bit more help at 5'8" because you've got the forwards around you. Defending out in the centres, you can kind of be stuck out there by yourself. So I don't really see that move. And we saw with the way Mbye defended on the weekend and the way Roberts has defended throughout the season, that if you're not marking up, if you're getting caught out in the centres, it's just as costly as anywhere else on the field. So I don't really see we've moved him there because it's easier defensively. Centre's one of the harder positions to defend.
Okay, well, all eyes will be at Suncorp Stadium, Garry, on Friday. We kick off the round there. There's no Thursday. There may be a Thursday game, but it's Magic Round. It's all going ahead. It was cancelled last year. We play Newcastle for the second time this year. They will start favourites. We did knock them off in Newcastle, Garry, but I'm pretty sure they'll be keen to get revenge. And I see problems ahead. I think this could be a heavy defeat if Kalen Ponga's on his game.
Yeah, and Ponga's the type of player that can rack up points against us quite easily. He's quite often played quite well against us. He's the type of player we don't deal well with. We seem to have a bit of trouble with fullbacks in general. You have a look at the game that Tommy Turbo had against us a couple of weeks ago, and Ponga's a player who could lay on some tries quite quickly against us. So, yes, it's going to be one to watch on Friday.
And finally, a bit of positive news before we go. There was a signing. It hasn't been 100% confirmed by the club, but a few tweets going around at Wigan and in the Sydney media that I think Oliver Gilder, I apologise if I say that wrong, an English centre who's a representative, played for Great Britain, plays for Wigan, won, I think, 2 premierships there, has signed with the club. Garry, like you said before, we are trying things recruitment-wise, and I do give the club props for that. And I think this is something that could potentially work out in an area of weakness next year at the club.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about him. I don't watch a lot of the Super League myself. So I did check out his highlights today. From what I saw of his highlights, now highlights are highlights for a reason. Yeah. They don't show the play where you do make mistakes. But having a look at his highlights, he looked pretty quick. He looked quite agile on his feet. Looked like he could beat a man one-on-one, that he had a nice pass. So having a look at his highlights looks like a positive. So I'm hopeful about the signing. It's nice that he has a bit of a relationship with Hastings. So and not just on the field. A lot of the reports around about Hastings is that he's not an easy person to get along with. So the fact that someone from Wigan is kind of coming across with him, that's probably a benefit for him, that he knows someone in the team, that he kind of has that connection with. So there's a lot of positives there for that. I'll probably go back and watch a couple of Wigan games now and kind of have a look at whether there are any glaring weaknesses. But having a look at his highlight packages, I think he could be a good signing.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes clubs, that haven't been able to recruit big names like sort of Canberra, they went down the English path. They're having a few troubles now, but I mean, we've either got to be able to develop juniors like we did when we had that premiership win all those years ago, or perhaps look for another avenue. And going through England, I think that's a start if you can't recruit big name players. So we'll wait and see. We'll have to wait and see till 2022 with those guys. But yeah, busy week, Garry. Your prediction for Friday? I'm going to go. I think Newcastle will win. I think it'll be 34-18. So there you go. Half competitive, but not confident.
Yeah, I'll go 28-12. I don't see us doing real well. But as I keep saying, we're the West Tigers. You never know what to expect.
Exactly. All right, mate. Thanks for joining us. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, mate.
Rising up, straight to the top. Had the guts, got the